Welcome to another edition of Made in Huntington Beach. Now, I'm not going to sing it for you, but I feel like saying it. The studio is alive with the sound of music. That's right. We have now entered into our own new manufacturers of musical instruments and accessories for you. And we have two very successful companies to really showcase for you today. One company, called the Original Musical Instrument Company, makes the old Dobro guitar, I believe back since 1928. So we'll learn all about how they make the guitar the old-fashioned way. And then next we'll learn all about things like sensors and pickups and the Fender guitar. You'll hear names like the Lace family and so forth and so on. And we'll learn all about their manufacturing process right here in the city of Huntington Beach. But first, let's get started with the Original Musical Instrument Company. They produce and manufacture the original Dobro guitar. And in studio with me right now, we are very happy to have the general manager of the facility, Michael Replogle. No, I'm sorry. Replogle.
That's very good.
How are you, sir?
Fine. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you for coming on the set.
Thank you for having me.
Am I right? 1928?
1928 is when the Dobro officially came into being, yes.
And how did it officially come into being?
Well, what was happening back in the 20s, you had very popular music which was very loud, ragtime, that type of music. And the banjo was one of the premier instruments, and the banjo being very loud, guitar players had a lot of trouble keeping up in terms of volume. So they'd find themselves drowned out or lost in the shuffle. So a number of musicians at the time were looking for other ways to amplify the instrument or get more sound to be able to compete. And the concept was brought to a family of brothers, the Dopiera brothers of Slavic descent. And basically, they came up with the idea to create an ampliphonic instrument, a mechanical amplifier. Essentially, the heart of the instrument was a very thin aluminum speaker cone. You can best consider it that way. Where when the strings would vibrate across, it would amplify it, just like the old Victrola phonographs.
Oh, really?
Same concept.
Okay.
So what you did is you wound up with an instrument that was mechanically amplifying the sound, and it wound up being 3, 4, 5 times the volume of a normal guitar.
Now, was it an immediate success right off?
Actually, it very much was. Along with the amplified sound, the new instrument had a wonderful sustain. And one of the brothers had the great idea of making the bodies out of metal to actually add even more sound and more sustain to the instrument. And at that time, Hawaiian music was extremely popular. So this instrument became it was perfect for exactly that type of sound. It had that very long, sustainy, sing-songy type of a tone.
So it really wasn't planned for the time, it was just good timing.
Yeah, actually it was.
Replogle, Liffring, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
A colorful history, though. Did the brothers actually produce it, I mean, hands-on produce it in the beginning? Oh,
absolutely. Actually, they first started out making a brand called National completely out of metal. They had a little falling out corporate-wise, and as a result, they actually wound up creating some new patents, which they then marketed under the brand name of Dobro. So they were actually competing with themselves for a while in their sister company, and then the companies, they resolved their differences and came back together and made both the National and Dobro brands. And it has been very much instrumental, pardon the pun, in creating several different types of common music that you hear now. The Louisiana Bayou Blues, the song, well, of course, all the Hawaiian type songs, but also in country music, that sing-songy background music that you hear so often is Dobro, or its descendant, the pedal
is
steel
attributed
guitar.
to. Wow.
And also very heavily influenced in bluegrass music also.
Really. Let me take a note here. Oh, sorry, pardon the pun. You had one, I can have one.
That's
okay,
true.
Mike? Okay.
That's true. I'll let you.
Now, what is really the biggest challenge today as far as musical instruments are concerned when you manufacture? Because you really manufacture in the old-fashioned way of doing things, right?
Yeah, the way that we make it is pretty much the same way that the instruments have been made since the turn of the century. We take a raw chunk of wood, and it comes in on one end as just raw wood, and it comes out the other end the guitar.
Yeah, and you'll see that in a minute.
That's right.
But you got to be. Do you ever want to computerize the place and say 1995? And
well, the temptation could be there, but truthfully, we are not in the mass merchandising concept of it. For us to computerize would take away some of the hand quality and hand craftsmanship, and would really actually not be viable in terms of numbers. I don't need to make that many instruments.
I see. Okay, so it's really in the handcraftedness that makes it effective.
That's right.
Understand. Okay, facility. How long have you been in Huntington Beach now?
We have been in Huntington Beach over 20 years, and moved moved down from actually Long Beach just a couple of years before that. So Original Musical Instruments Company started in 1967.
Okay.
Originally in Long Beach, and then relocated to Huntington Beach.
Okay. And how many employees currently?
Right now we have 27 employees, 12,000 square feet.
Wow.
We're actually one of the oldest companies operating out of that part of Huntington Beach. Now there's a lot of manufacturing around us also, but we're one of the originals. Pardon the pun.
I think we're going to have a few
too many
puns.
puns, yes.
Well, let's, keeping with that melody, let's go with, do you want to show us how you can make it, first of all, and then we'll talk some more?
Sure.
Because it's fascinating. They make it really in the old-fashioned style of handcraftedness, and I think you should watch this. So let's go ahead and start now and do it. Let's call you up on the board. If you can take a look at the monitor, we'll pop it up there, if I'm doing it right. And go ahead and start with the production of Dobro.
Okay, well, every instrument starts out, as I said before, we get the raw wood into the shop. We buy what's called 16-quarter hard maple, which is the fundamental of our instruments, basically being a 4-inch piece of wood.
Where does that come from, the wood? I mean,
the wood is mostly an eastern hard maple, and we have a couple of different companies that we buy it from. They prepare it, and we buy lots of it.
Got it.
So when we get it into our shop, the first thing we have to do is basically slice it up into usable sizes for what we're going to do. Now, we make two different things out of that wood that we get. One are the actual sides of the guitars, which we call the ribs, and the other thing is actually the neck of the guitar. Now, we do one thing that's unusual. We make a one-piece neck. A lot of companies try to save money cost-effectively by gluing up wood in different shapes and making necks out of 2 or sometimes 3 pieces, but we use one piece, which is, again, something that's unique to the way that we make the instrument.
Really? I don't think a lot of people would know that.
No.
That's interesting.
That's true. So from there, we actually take the piece of wood, it's planed into a block, and from each block of wood, it's hand-traced and cut out on a bandsaw, and we actually get 2 rough blanks, outlines of necks from each chunk of wood. From there, it's taken into various stages of machining. We will take it to the routers, and we will start putting the shape and the form of the neck together, whether it's a round neck or also what we make a square neck. They are both worked on these machines over here, which give the basic outline of the shape. It's later hand-shaped, which you'll see that in a moment. So from here we go and we actually do the drilling and slotting and all of the pre-forming of the neck so that we have a complete blank neck. We also then buy rosewood, and for some of our models, ebony. And this rosewood turns into what we call the fingerboard, and this is where the player actually places his fingers and creates the notes on the guitar. So this piece of rosewood or ebony is cut to shape, planed, and on the proper models we put a radius on the top of the fingerboard. It's all done by hand on sanders, and it's very much a distinctive human touch the way that we do it. We run it through from that point a machine where we put the slots in so that they're sawn in a regular interval for the scale of the guitar, and then the frets, which are the little pieces of wire that the
How did it got its name, frets?
Beats me. That's one of those things. I'm sure we could find that out, but I've actually never
that's a
researched
fret.
it. That's a fret.
Okay.
It's a small piece of wire that when you press the string against it, it shortens the string, and that makes a higher note. So those are hand-mounted into the fingerboard. The fingerboard itself is then glued onto the neck, and depending on the type of the neck, there will usually be what we call a truss rod reinforcement in the center of the neck. The strings exert a lot of pressure on the neck itself, and over time it will tend to bow the neck. So what we do is we run a slot down the center of the neck, and we put a metal bar in that's adjustable so that when we can tighten the screw on the end, the bar will bend the opposite direction, which counteracts some of the string pull. At that point, the instrument is all glued up, or rather the neck is glued up. We then let it set, usually for 24 hours for good measure. From there, the neck goes into the shaping department. Every neck is completely hand-shaped. Our guys work on these with sanders and hand files and hand rasps, and it's not necessarily the most computerized or efficient way, but it does give us a hand touch and a hand feel, and it gets exactly the neck that we want. From here, they go into the paint department. At this point, I should probably go back over to how we build the bodies. So going back to the beginning again, we have our basic piece of wood, which we slice up into very thin pieces, about 1/16 of an inch thick by about 3¼ inches wide, and about 62 inches long. These are put into a hot iron. Actually, what we do is we'll soak them for a couple of minutes first, and then from that point they're put in a preheated iron, which is clamped down, and that essentially steams the shape of the outside of the guitar into this piece of wood. From here, it's going to get reinforcements put on the top and the back, edges. We call this kerfing, another one of those words.
Yes.
Now, Dobros are a little unique. On the wood body end, we make our own plywood, and the tops and backs are made out of plywood. They have been made that way from the beginning. So we will take the various sheets of plywood, layer them together in our own press, and create our own pieces of plywood. The center of the guitar also has to have a mounting area to hold the resonator itself. And this is, again, completely unique to our instrument. So we will actually build this round ring, and this will be placed in the center of the guitar. Now, the ring will have bracing around the edge so that it can mount to the top and the back, but it also has holes cut in it to allow the air and sound to move within inside the instrument itself. So once we glue the back on and the ring is in place, then we will glue the top on. And the tops are done the old-fashioned way. We take dowel posts and press them in, and it's a time-honored way of doing it.
Sure.
From here, once the tops are mounted and the instrument is basically, the body is basically complete, we'll run it over and we'll trim the edges of the instrument until we have a basic wood body. Some bodies have binding, in which case we'll run a routing cut on the top and the back of the instrument, and we will glue in and hand tape binding is what it's called, hand install the binding on the guitar. From that point, it is final sanded and prepared for paint, and at this point both the necks and the bodies wind up going into the spray booth. And we do a special process of spray painting here. It's all natural varnishes and lacquers to enhance the sound quality of the instrument. It's not a polyester, polyplastic finish. It's all natural varnish which actually bonds with the wood and resonates. So they go through a special process which could take about 2 weeks to be finally finished. From there, they'll go in and they'll be sanded in preparation to buffing and polishing. At that point, the necks and the bodies, once they're polished, come back together again in our assembly area. Our neck fitters will take each neck and hand fit it to an individual body. Now this is different. Most acoustic guitars, the necks are mounted on the body before they're ever painted. But for us, they come together at this stage of the assembly production. So we will then hand fit and make sure that the angle is correct and the fingerboards are properly aligned. Then we'll go into final assembly where all the hardware and the parts and the resonator and the strings, everything is installed and tested and checked out. Now, one other angle on this is that we still do make metal body guitars. And this, of course, is a whole nother process on the body end. We'll start out with a sheet of brass. It's formed on our machine to give us the basic outline. We will take the tops, cut the form, put the F-holes in, shape it. The ring to hold the resonator is welded into the top. The top itself is welded to the back. It's all hand sanded and ground and then hand polished and buffed.
Incredible.
From that point on, we'll generally put a design, either sandblasting or hand engraving on it. We send out to a chrome plater. That's about the only thing we don't do in-house. And then the chrome plated guitar comes back, and here we are in assembly again, where again the neck is fit and the instrument is put together.
Incredible. Wow. How many are you going to do in a year?
We're doing about 2,500 in a year at this point, 2,600.
Wow.
This is about 4 times what the production was a year and a half ago.
Incredible. The old-fashioned way.
The old-fashioned way.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you.
Hey, longevity in town, too.
Yeah.
Thanks for sticking around. That's great. All right. Michael, thank you for being with us. We just saw the Dobro being made the old-fashioned way. That's the way to do it. Hey, we scored, didn't we? We did it. All right. I'm done with the puns. Next, Actadine coming up. Stay tuned.